morning, and thank you so much for joining us on this sunny and hot Monday morning. We've got quite a few people joining us, so just while we wait, feel free to pop in the chat function. Why don't you let me know what you got up to the weekend, how you safely celebrated England winning their first Euros match. Also, if we were face to face, we'd obviously be able to network beforehand, and we don't want to lose that element. So again, feel free to pop in the chat function, say hello, pop your contact details, a bit about your business. That is absolutely fine. Just make sure when you're sending your message that you select to all panelists and attendees, so then everyone can see your message rather than just myself and Sarah. So yeah, we'll give it one more minute and then we'll get started. So yeah, as I said, feel free to pop in the chat, say hello, let us know what you've got up to. I can confirm that this webinar is being recorded, and we will share a copy of the recording following the event. It won't be straight away, but a few later on this week. This is a webinar format, so just to let you know, you can only see and hear us. We can't see you, but you can communicate with us via the chat and the Q&A function. And we'll also be doing polls as well, so make sure you're paying attention, because you might be caught out when we run a few of the polls. So yeah, morning everyone, love it, everyone's being polite. So yeah, morning to everyone in the chat function. We've also got someone who's raised their hand. So Oliver, feel free to pop in the chat function and let me know if you're okay, or if you've accidentally raised your hand. That's not a problem, I can sort that out. So, that's no problem. So we'll get started, because if people miss my intro, then that's not a big deal. So for those of you who don't realise, my name is Kayleen Harrington and I'm the event manager for Norfolk Chambers of Commerce. So thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, I wanted to let you know that the B2B exhibition will hopefully be taking place on Thursday, the 14th of October. The B2B exhibition is Norfolk's largest business-to-business exhibition. It's completely free to attend and attracts hundreds of businesses on the day. B2B is a highlight on the Norfolk events calendar, and I'll pop a link in the event page in the chat shortly. Also pleased to let you know that UEA will also be exhibiting at the B2B. So, a business case for investing in well-being. Considering the well-being of your staff is key to being a good employer and a successful organisation. Well-being contributes to staff engagement, it helps with retention and enhances productivity. On this 60-minute webinar, Sarah Connolly, Professor of Personnel Economics at Norwich Business School UEA, will introduce you to cost-effectiveness analysis to support investment choices for improving workplace well-being. Following the presentation, there will be a live Q&A where Sarah will answer your questions. So please use the Q&A function when you have a question. Apologies, but I just can't talk this morning. There were too many tongue twisters, or my brain just wasn't engaging. So yeah, I hope you had a little chuckle. So Sarah, over to you.
Thanks very much, Kayleen, and good morning, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. Great. So thank you very much. And I'm going to talk for about 40 minutes on making a business case for a wellbeing program in the workplace. The material that I'm going to talk about comes from a body of research that I'm undertaking with colleagues at UEA at the University of Sheffield and with Rand Europe and Vitality. So the names of the full team are up there on the screen. And I also wanted to let you know that, that a lot of the resources that I'm going to be talking about can also be found on the What Works Wellbeing website, which is an evidence-based program for supporting organisations in making decisions that take account of well-being, but also can be found through the Propel Hub, which is a collaboration of universities looking at ways in which productivity can be enhanced. So that's a bit about me and what I'm going to be talking about. Kayleen did warn you there would be polls. So the first poll is just to get a sense of who's out there. We can't see you, but if you could tell us a little bit about yourself in response to this first poll.
So if you're not used to polls, it will be along the bottom. We're just currently showing current roles. Sarah, I don't know if you want to read through the different
Yes.
options.
So which of these descriptions best suits your current role? A senior or executive manager, someone in human resources, a worker or an employee with no management responsibility, a consultant, an academic, or another role. And you can pop that into the chat if you would like to share that.
Thank you. We're just waiting for a few more people. We'll give it a couple more seconds and then I'll end it and launch so everyone can see the results. There we go.
Great, excellent. So it's a mixed audience that we have today, and we've got mostly, I suppose, people in human resource, occupational health or well-being. We've got employees without management responsibilities, and then team leaders and consultants. That's really super useful in helping me think about some of the messaging as we're going through. Thank you. So, sorry, Kayleen, I now can't. Oh, I've done it now. Thank you. So the health and well-being landscape. Gosh, there's an awful lot of things out there. If you think about on the health side, there might be activities that you could run within your organization to encourage healthy lifestyles, either through physical exercise, gym memberships. It could be that you're trying to discourage unhealthy lifestyles with smoking reduction, healthy eating, or supporting people with their weight. So there's a whole load of options that you could be providing on the health side. On the well-being side, you might be thinking about people's mental health. You might be thinking of resilience, but you might also be thinking about some of the other things that can impact on people's mental health, like worry about money, or thinking about ways in which you can encourage your teams to work together outside of the workplace through workplace volunteering. All of these come under the umbrella of health and well-being activities. And so I'm going to be talking about the various ways in which these kinds of activities may impact on your organization and how you can use that impact to develop a business case. But before I do that, it's poll number 2. I'd really like to get a sense of whether you've actually had an experience of trying to encourage your organization to invest in well-being, and what that experience has been. Do they completely get it, understand well-being, and are happy to invest, or do they really not get it? Or are there issues like limited resources that make it difficult to invest? Is it that you really don't know what it is that your people need? Are there, and I guess that this really must be the case at the moment, other really important priorities that take you away from the well-being? Or do you have no experience in trying to persuade your organization, so you're really starting from scratch here? Or have you other kinds of experiences? So if you'd like to take a moment and vote. Right, that's great. I thought it might be limited resources. I think that really resonates with the work we've done locally. The concern about it costing money, and I hope one of the things that I'm going to persuade you of today, or at least give you some tools to persuade those within your organization of, is actually you may cost something upfront, but it may also save you resources in the longer term. So if we think first of all about the current context. We have been living through very, very unusual and demanding times. We know from research undertaken by Mind, the mental health charity, that many adults and an even higher proportion of young people feel their mental health has got worse during the last year. But if we look more specifically at physical health, people working at home in their kitchen, on their dining room table, hasn't been good for their back. The fact that we've had to live in a more socially isolated way has had impacts on people's work-life balance. They've done less exercise, they've comfort eaten, and some people are drinking more. And so in terms of the current context, actually the health and mental health needs of the workforce are perhaps even more pressing than in normal circumstances. And if we look very specifically at what recent surveys of mental health and the workforce tell us, they do tell us a quite worrying picture. So the CIPD survey on the left-hand side is indicating really very high percentages of employees reporting presenteeism. So they're at work but not working effectively. Only a tiny percentage are saying that they haven't observed presenteeism in their workforce. We've also got high levels of organisations reporting leavism, so people working outside of their working hours, using their annual leave to catch up on work, and only 30% of organisations saying they're not aware of any leavism. And then the Westfield Health Survey indicating an increase in days lost due to mental health problems and significantly diminished levels of productivity. So actually, what these findings and what the context are telling us is that it's a really important and pressing topic now. And so even if it hasn't been on your planning horizon, it really should be now. And one of the reasons that it really should be now is that employers are, of course, legally obligated to protect the health and mental health of their employees in the work context. And also are required to protect the mental health of their employees under discrimination laws. So actually, there are a lot of legal obligations that organisations need to take account of. Now, if my talk was just going to be it's the law, we could all go home now. It's not just about legal obligations. What I'm going to spend the rest of the time doing is talking through some of the other factors that you might want to consider beyond your statutory responsibilities. And so I'm going to start with some pretty pictures that really ask us to think, first of all, about what is well-being and what can we within organisations as employers or managers do to enhance or support people's well-being? Well, we can't, have yoga sessions overlooking the sea, but what can we do? Well, I think first of all, it's important to think about what are the factors that influence our health and well-being, and they are a complex, interconnected set of factors. And although things like the food we eat, where we live, the transport and the skills we have are all very important, actually a crucial element to individual well-being is the work we do, the people we work with, and how we are managed. And so this is good work, and good workplace is key to individual well-being. And when the What Works Centre for Wellbeing was established, they undertook a national consultation exercise on what things people felt could help measure their well-being. And you can see the three main themes there: feeling safe, feeling loved, feeling fulfilled. And the factors that contribute to each of those dimensions. And what I've done is to just put in italics the elements that may link or may be influenced by the workplace. So having a job, important to feeling safe. Being respected and feeling part of something bigger is something we get from the workplace and contributes to feeling loved. And then feeling fulfilled, well, actually that sense of achievement, feeling valued, having opportunities, control, agency, and choice. These are all really important elements to having a good job. And what does well-being deliver to us as an individual, and then in the workplace? Well, I've got three sections here about the health benefits of health and well-being, the personal and societal benefits, and then the third block there is really what I'm going to be focusing on today, the productivity effects of improved well-being and how that may impact through reduced absenteeism, presenteeism, greater creativity, resilience, and adaptability in the workplace. And I'm going to turn now to my first bit of evidence. This is statistical evidence that I'm going to be talking about that comes from a national survey. And this is a survey data called Britain's Healthiest Workplace. And this is a survey that goes out to companies. The companies choose to participate, and then they encourage their employees to respond as well. And I'm going to be focusing on the responses that came from individuals. And I'm going to be using data from 2016 to 2018. So this is pre-pandemic. Now, I'll give you a moment to recover from the shock of the diagram. You're probably, some of you, thinking, well, it was all very well when she had waves and when she had flowers and yoga poses, and now look at this. Let me just talk you through what this chart illustrates. What I'm trying to show here is how do things like well-being interventions, and those could be health and well-being days, it could be a well-being app, it could be that you provide some kind of health insurance, or it could be sleep apps or sleep support. How do things like that impact on well-being and then productivity? So in the left-hand side, what we've got there is, did people use any of these well-being interventions in 2016? And then in the middle, we've got, well, did as a consequence anything change in their job satisfaction, their mental health, or their physical health? And then on the right-hand side, following on from that, Did anything change in terms of their presenteeism, working while not well, or their sickness days, the number of days they spend absent from work? Did anything change there by 2018? So it's a sort of a longitudinal journey that we're interested in here. And we're allowing for all sorts of complex interactions to be happening here, but the ones that you need to focus on are the dark green lines, the thick green lines, because what these thick green lines say is that use of the wellbeing interventions in 2016 led to improved job satisfaction, mental health, and physical health in 2017, and that those things all led to reduced presenteeism in 2018. So actually, the route by which these wellbeing interventions have impacted presenteeism is through a combination of people enjoying their jobs more, having fewer mental health issues, and feeling physically healthier. But interestingly, there's another arced loop going over the top there, which is actually a direct effect of using this intervention directly improving presenteeism. There was no evidence here that any of that this intervention impacted absenteeism. So I've got 3 of these diagrams. So the second one, well, you know how to read this one now. This is about fitness interventions. So the use of fitness interventions, and that may be through gym membership or a subsidized cycle to work scheme, or joining in workplace walks or fitness activities, or nutrition or weight support. The use of these in 2016, again, led to people enjoying their jobs more, experiencing fewer mental health problems, and better physical health. And these also all impacted on reduced presenteeism by 2018. Here, there was no direct route. It was all indirect through job satisfaction and mental and physical health. And the third was mindfulness interventions in a very broad sense. So actual mindfulness, work stress reductions, relaxation activities. And again, what we see is a route of using that intervention into job satisfaction and then into presenteeism. So those people who use these interventions experienced improved job satisfaction and reduced presenteeism. And here again, there was a direct link between the use of the intervention and reduced presenteeism. So what that tells us is that there's strong evidence that these kinds of workplace interventions will impact on key factors that will influence productivity. So when we're thinking of developing a business case, what we're doing is really weighing up all of the different costs of providing this intervention against all of the different benefits. Now, I think in organisations, it's really important to think about all of the costs, and some of these costs are easily forgotten. So you've got to think about what's the intervention going to be, who's going to be delivering it. Can we do it internally? Do we have to bring in an outside provider? What kinds of what sorts of purchasing orders need to be raised? So think about all of the administration of that. And secondly, make sure you tell people that it's available. It's got to be known within the organisation that these offers are available to the workforce. And then you've got to think about the actual costs of the time that people spend participating. And in a non-virtual world, you might have to rent a space for the activity. You may have to provide tea and coffee. And one of the interventions I evaluated was a music group, and so we also had to cost having the sheet music and the instruments. So there are a lot of different kinds of costs that you need to think about here. And then on the benefit side, well, I think strongly we should think about the well-being benefit, and then think about what are the productivity gains that arise as a consequence. And so the second piece of evidence that I'm going to be talking about is a randomized control trial. And so this is a randomized control trial of mindfulness apps. So these were apps that people could use on their phones. And there were two apps being trialed here. One was Headspace, and probably many people here today have encountered Headspace. It's a general mindfulness app. And the second was an app that was designed specifically to think about the kinds of stress related issues that may apply in the policing context, which was where the trial took place. And so it was designed specifically for use of police officers and staff. And then there was a control group. So this is really very important that you're able to separate what's happening for those who are using the apps against what would be happening anyway. So I'm going to just talk through about the different sorts of costs that we needed to take into account here. We looked first of all at who was participating in the trial, and we needed to think about what the costs of their salaries were to estimate the costs of their time and how much time they engaged with the apps. So we looked at the number of senior police officers, which obviously would have had the highest salary costs, police officers, civilian staff. In each case, they spent about 5 hours undertaking the intervention. So those were the costs of participating. In terms of delivery, because it was an app, that you didn't have to pay for a trainer coming in to support the users of Headspace. It was very intuitive, just download on the phone and you started off. With the MindFit Cop, because this was designed specifically for the trial, it hadn't been pre-tested, there were glitches, and so there were some extra costs associated supporting the participants, which we needed to take account of. And then there were other costs. There were the subscription fees for the licenses for Headspace and the development cost. And so those were the total costs that were associated with the trial of these two apps. What about the benefits? Okay, well, we looked at two sorts of benefits here. The first was the number of days and the number of spells of absence due to ill health. And you can see that we saw many fewer days of absence in the two trial groups, MindFitCop and Headspace. And what we also found was that when people were asked about their productivity, there were really very significant gains in productivity reported by both participants in the Headspace and the MindFit Cop trials. What about well-being? So we asked about life satisfaction before they started. We asked about life satisfaction 10 weeks in. We asked about life satisfaction at 24 weeks. And what we saw was very immediate gains in life satisfaction for those who are using Headspace. It was very, very quick, the gains from Headspace, and those gains were sustained at 24 weeks. It was steadier progress with the MindFit Cop, but there were significantly higher gains at the end of the trial. And these are big because life satisfaction is only measured on a 0 to 10 scale. So we've got a gain of about 0.7 points, which is really, really very significant. The other thing that I wanted to draw your attention to, and this is actually one of the important things about doing trials and thinking about what would be happening otherwise, is that actually for the control group, although the control group we saw worse days of absence and we saw the same sorts of levels of productivity, they are actually happier at the end of the trial 2. And so that's an important element of a randomized control trial, because you are able to compare the benefits of the intervention groups against similar employees, and you can then work out whether or not the gains you observe arise through the intervention, which they do in this case. So, is this intervention cost effective? Well, I've shown you that life satisfaction increased, so that's one important element of the goal. With the MindFit COP, if you take account of how much it cost to invest in it, the gains in productivity, there were actually net savings of just over £3,000 per employee. And with the headspace, again, taking account of the lower costs of the license fee, and then the gains in lower absences and fewer greater productivity, there were net savings per employee of just over 2,500. So it's not just that these were they balanced out. We got, they were sort of neutral in terms of costs. These were actual savings that were delivered through this trial. Now, obviously, I understand that it's complicated, expensive to run randomized control trials. So the next set of evidence is illustrations through case studies. So these are case studies with organizations that had tried something new, and they gave us some of their administrative data and talked to us about the intervention, and we estimated the costs associated with the activity. So I'm going to start off with something that was actually a very, very small and easy adjustment to workplace practices. So this was in a learning support office in a university, and they had a rather rigid working day. And in their staff surveys, people had reported being unhappy with the lack of control that they had, particularly about managing their work-life balance. And so the office decided to implement a very simple flexi time initiative. They set out what were core hours, and people were able to adjust their hours within those core. It was done on a trust system, and basically with a spreadsheet that people filled in. So the costs of implementing this were really about design of the spreadsheet, informing forming staff, and then some training sessions. Now, the benefits that this office found was that actually there were far fewer days of absence. And because they had a big reduction in staff sicknesses, this meant that their teams were more productive and there were quite significant productivity savings. And so when you took account of the total costs of provision and the productivity savings, the net cost per employee was only £17. But what they also got was a staff that felt more in control of what they did and more engaged in their work. So the second example that I'm going to talk about is something that is used quite frequently now, mental health first aider training program. The way in which this usually works is that you train a number of key office holders, and then there's a sort of a snowballing within the organization. The main costs are, of course, bringing in the trainer right at the beginning, and then the costs of time with that snowballing down of the training. And in this organisation, it was a local authority, they had a lot of mental health provision, but they found that no one used it. And so one of the things that they were actually keen to do was to improve people's awareness of their provision and to improve managerial confidence in talking to people and signposting people to the mental health provision. what they found was actually, in the short term, an increase in the number of people taking days absent due to mental health problems. But in the longer term, they were able to retain many more of their staff. So, although in the short run there was a cost, which was that more people were off sick due to mental health problems, and there was also a cost because people suddenly were aware of the mental health support within the organisation and started using it. But the benefits were these much better staff retention figures and also increased managerial confidence in supporting colleagues with mental health problems. And when you compared the total costs with the productivity savings, this turned out to be a net cost per employee of £2.46. So very, very reasonable. The third example is a much bigger intervention. This is in a construction company. It's an HR coaching and wellbeing plan. It involved one-to-one meetings, and it was piloted to 400 people within the organisation. It was expensive to implement, but they then found, as a consequence, that employee turnover fell, staff sickness fell, their overall engagement of staff in their work rose. And they also found that those people who participated reported really significant improved health benefits, which the organisation feel would have implications for health and safety in the workplace in the future. So once you took account of the total costs, the productivity savings, the net costs per employee were actually savings for the organisation. Okay, so I've presented sort of statistical evidence, I've presented a randomized control trial and some case studies. I'm going to turn to some other kinds of case studies here. These are case studies that other members of the team are undertaking, and these are looking at organizations' well-being journeys. So people in these organizations were interviewed just at the beginning of last year, in the autumn of last year, and beginning part of this year. And so we've got a sense of how the well-being journey is moving. And what I've got here are just some quotes, really, about how, in their own words, organizations are thinking about well-being and performance. And so in the IT company, and I've highlighted things for emphasis, what they're talking about there is creating a buzz, creating a space for people to think and be creative. So by giving a well-being lens to the business, it's actually giving people the space to think and be creative and then be more productive. The second company here is really thinking about presenteeism, and here they've got such a wide range of resources that they're using. So they're thinking about alcohol, they're thinking about musculoskeletal problems, they're thinking about the whole person and how that impacts on their individual performance and productivity. So the second set of themes that came out from the interview were really about business advantage, that by investing in your people, you're able to actually gain advantage in the business environment. So each of these organizations are talking about, recognition amongst their peers and being ahead of the curve, and also how it helps respond to new circumstances. And then the last set of quotes is really about these businesses all having got to a point where actually they're recognizing that it's true that there are productivity gains. It's true that there may be business advantages, but it's actually also true that well-being in itself is a desirable something that benefits the organization in and of itself. So another problem that people often raise is that you spend all of this money making an offer of well-being, and this is an illusion. I don't know if many people were watching movies about building baseball pitches in the middle of maize fields in Iowa. So the line from the movie is, "If you build it, they will come." And so I've obviously twisted that around. If you offer it, so if you have this well-being provision, will they use it? Well, one of the things is, I mentioned this earlier, they've got to know about it. And in the Britain Healthiest Workforce data that I mentioned before, a lot of organisations say they have provision, but when we ask the employees about it, they aren't aware of the offer. So they've got to know about it to use it. So if they know about it, they will come, they will benefit. But actually, there's something else quite interesting that happens with a lot of these well-being provisions, that you get benefits when people know about it but don't use it, because actually it's a signal that you're working for a caring organization. And so in particular, interventions like alcohol and smoking support, interventions like mental health provision and workplace volunteering, a lot of people value that and feel more satisfied in their work and are then more productive, even if they don't use it at all. So where do you go from here? A few practical things to finish off the talk. I would suggest taking a look at the material on the What Works Centre for Wellbeing pages on implementing and evaluating a wellbeing initiative. On that, we've got some principles of workplace wellbeing. We've got evidence of the sort I've been describing today on what works, but also some advice on, well, what's the context of your organization? What kind of organization are you? Are you large? Are you small? What are the skill sets? What's the age of your employees? So helping you think about what to implement. And then there is a cost effectiveness calculator, so a tool that will actually enable you to do the sorts of calculations that I presented earlier about the costs of the interventions and the savings that are yielded. What else might you need to be thinking about? Well, who's using the initiative? I mean, I think that you're obviously going to be best placed to think about your organization, what kind of workplace it is, what are the ages and what are the risks associated with the work. And that will help you think about what kinds of interventions. And then you'll want evidence on who's using the initiative and where. One of the things about the evidence we've looked at multi-site organizations is actually interventions do have differential take-up because the office space, the office dynamics are different in each of the places. You'll obviously need to be thinking about what changes are being observed and what are the impact on productivity. And liaising, I mean, many of you are working in HR offices, and so that you'll be better acquainted with what your organizational data is on some of these things, but liaising with HR to collect some of this data is obviously very important. The incidence of absences, and in particular long-term absences, and how people are supported in return to work from those absences. If you're not already measuring presenteeism, capturing that is, I think, really important, because the evidence is that this is even more of a problem than absenteeism in the workplace. And then think about what it is that matters to you organizationally. What are your key performance indicators? They will be things like financial indicators, maybe well-being indicators, but also safety indicators within the organization, and customer satisfaction. A lot of these interventions, although I haven't talked about customer satisfaction, a lot of these interventions, if they're creating more engaged employees, if they're encouraging better teamwork, they will also yield better interactions with service users and customers. And one of the interventions that we looked at was in the healthcare sector, where it was a sort of a conflict resolution intervention. And the consequences of this intervention were far fewer fallings out, as it were, conflicts between staff. So it was a more harmonious team, but also better interaction with patients and their families. And so HR found that they had far fewer complaints and grievances to deal with. And so that's a different kind of success measure for an organization. And so what would I say are the key takeaways here? Well, I think that I would say, first of all, well-being is important on its own and should be pursued for its own benefit, but it does also yield improvements within the organization, and crucially through better health, job satisfaction, and employee engagement, which can impact on productivity. While it's convincing to say to the organization it'll save you money, it's even more convincing if you're able to show the sort of money that it might save. And so a cost effectiveness approach, as I've used here, can certainly help you make that business case more compelling. And I think that what I've also tried to show is that although it does cost upfront to invest in an intervention, the improvements in productivity will be sustained for 6, 12, 18 months later. I mean, that horrible diagram that I showed you of interventions in 2016 were yielding productivity benefits still in 2018. So there are longer term benefits which will yield cost savings and enhance the business case. And also, the investment in employee well-being will have other benefits that we've only really scratched at here. Better team cohesion, better relationships within the workplace and outside of the workplace. And I think that those are going to be really important benefits for organizations building back after this sort of terribly difficult time that we've all experienced. And so that's the end of what I wanted to present. We've got one more poll. Thanks, Kayleen. So which of the points that we've covered will you act on this month? have a look at the What Works Centre for Wellbeing, look at some of the other resources from Workload Well or the Propel Hub, map out what your organisation's already doing, find out what data you're already collecting, or will it be something else that you would take away from this and pursue further? And you can vote for more than one thing. That's great. Oh, and some of you did vote for watching Field of Dreams, re-watching Field of Dreams. That's great. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to stop sharing, and Kayleen will come back to me with any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think Joe's comment in the chat sums it up. He says it's game changing to see this evidence. He then goes on to say, I hope this will be published widely. Really interesting. So do you know if there are any plans, or I guess that could effectively be a question?
Thank you very much. Thanks, Joe, for the positive feedback. Yes, it's very much our intention to publish this and to share it widely. What we're working on at the moment is a toolkit for HR professionals. We're part of the Propel Hub is a partnership with the CIPD. So we're going to be working with them on the development, but also the publicising of the toolkit. We also have connections with ACAS and the Society for Occupational Medicine. So these are going to be our practitioner routes out. We've had this very successful collaboration with the team at the Chambers of Commerce here in Norwich. They've been helping us get the message out over the last year. UEA have a new collaboration with the LEP and other organisations called Productivity East. So we'll also be using that as a route to publicising our findings. But I think that, you know, I mean, Kayleen, you said at the beginning we'd have done some networking. You know, what I would have hoped to have done in a face-to-face event would be to gather business cards to, you know, get you to say, yes, come and talk to my managers. You know, I would have been seeking opportunities through you to sort of snowball and get the message out. So I think absolutely, if anyone has any other suggestions or people that you think it would be useful for us as a team to speak to, please do let us know either through the chat or emailing directly.
Thank you. And we've got quite a few questions. So I'm going to kick off with the first one. The examples and initiatives are super, but how can you be sure what an organisation needs? Would you begin with a staff survey or suggest anything else in order to kick things off?
Yes, I think that's a really, really important question. I think that I think a lot of experimentation is probably needed in the first instance, small scale initiatives. I think that, you know, within your HR departments, you probably already have some data that allow you to pick up on where there are, you know, hotspots of where perhaps you're seeing a lot of absences, or you're seeing a lot of workplace conflict. And so that might help you think about particular parts of the organization that you might need to focus on. Depending on the nature of your business, you might think about, okay, what is it we're asking our staff to do on a daily basis, and what are the risks for them and their health and well-being from that. So if you have a lot of people doing, I don't know, driving, heavy lifting, then it may make sense to think about the musculoskeletal interventions. If you've got a lot of shift work, then the sleep. I mean, with the trials in the police, the MindFit cop was almost like a sort of a really classic learning experience. This is mindfulness, this is how you practice it, these are the sorts of situations that you might find it useful. Whereas Headspace was really a, gosh, there are all of these different things you could look at, and it left it to individuals to choose. And there were 3 areas that the police chose. One was sleep. And so that was really the point I was going to make. If you've got shift work, then actually helping and supporting people with their sleep patterns is really important. The other thing that a lot of the police staff looked at was healthy eating, and I think that actually was connected with the shift work. Once you're outside of normal work and eating patterns, then there's a certain amount of grabbing things on the go, which isn't necessarily very healthy. And the other thing that a lot of the staff were using were about dealing with difficult situations. So if you know that your staff have, sort of emotionally taxing situations, then that's also a clue. What we have at UEA is something that we call the East of England Wellbeing Task Force. So we meet periodically with employers and ask them about how they've implemented well-being strategies. And I think that there is genuinely a fair amount of experimentation, that you start small, you try things. Do people seem to benefit or enjoy participating in that, and then use that to sort of roll out more broadly within the organization.
Thank you. So we've got 3 more questions. So Clive says, it's great to be able to back up initiatives with the business case. How important is it that the offer is genuine, that the management really do care about people rather than just seeing it as a management technique to save money?
That's a really good question, Clive. In the studies that I mentioned with the quotes, where we've been tracking businesses and their well-being journey, one of the things that comes through really strongly is the importance of authenticity. That actually you've got to mean it, because what you're aiming to do is to persuade people that you care about their health and well-being. And if that looks like a tick box exercise, then people aren't going to invest in it. So I think that it does need leadership, and the implementation of these kinds of strategies requires senior management buy-in, but actually it's middle managers that are really crucial in supporting successful intervention and rollout. And that's why with the mental health first aiders, that it was so important to get them trained and them involved, because they were actually the ones dealing on a sort of not day-to-day basis, but on within the workplace, they were dealing with those questions and issues.
Thank you. So then we've also got from Aidan, do you have any thoughts around financial well-being / education programs to help address some causes of stress, in brackets, fear around finances, as well as managing stress itself?
Yes, that's also a really good question. When we started talking to organisations about their wellbeing offer, we talked to the people at BP who had a very impressive array of wellbeing offers, and what they said was that although sort of businesses might like to think that you come to work and it's only the work, actually, in reality, all of your worries and concerns from outside of work, you don't just leave that at the door, it comes into work with you. And depending on the age of your workforce, these kinds of concerns are going to be more or less pressing. And so they actually found a financial well-being plan very beneficial. Um, in the analysis that I've done, we didn't have a lot of data on use of financial well-being. I think that there's a bit of an evidence gap, and it was one of the things that I believe Wellcome funded research into earlier this year, looking particularly at younger workers and financial well-being. I mean, certainly what we know is that worry about finances, it does undermine workplace performance. It's a question of what kinds of interventions might support that I think there's less evidence on.
Thank you. And I know it is now 12:30, but I'm just going to ask the one last question. So Clive's asked another question of, have you found evidence that organisations investing in wellbeing actually attract the best, most talented employees in their field?
I think that that's what the organisations do feel. That comes through in the case study, material, that they feel that it does that being a caring employer does give them an edge in the market for recruiting and, crucially, retaining talent. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And sorry if you can hear the hedge drummer that someone near me has now started. So yeah, it's just to say thank you so much for joining us. I don't know about you, but I found that extremely useful. I'll share a copy of the presentation following this event, along with any useful links and contact details which have been referenced. I also popped in the chat a survey link just so we can gather feedback, which shapes our virtual offering. I'm also pleased to let you know that we are hopefully this week going to be launching a couple of networking events face to face. So it will be great to hopefully meet some of you in person in July. So yeah, thank you so much. I don't know if you want to say a final farewell.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day and week, and hopefully we will see you soon. Bye, everyone.